So the summary of today's talk is, the CDC and state governments are recommending and demanding masks and imposing fines. In Massachusetts, it's about a $300 fine if you do not wear these masks. And the masks that are being recommended are medical masks and the cloth masks. And the N95 masks, the ones that are really tight, that are used in surgery rooms and things like that, are only for healthcare workers. Because we don't want to deplete the healthcare workers, apparently, by those in power. And the question is, are the medical masks better than the cloth masks? That's one question. What about the N95 mask, which we're not supposed to be using, which means we, the citizens? And do masks affect us in any other way? So that's really the questions that we want to ask. Someone's saying there's update going on your body system right now. You can proceed anywhere. Just come back shortly. Yeah, that's right. This is what the CDC says. If you go to the CDC's site, it says the use of cloth face coverings to help slow the spread of COVID-19. If you read it, it says how to wear cloth face covering. They actually tell you how to wear it. It should fit snugly, be secured around your ear loops, include multiple layers of fabric, allow breathing without restriction, be able to be laundered. They basically tell you, in fact, they tell you how to make a homemade cloth face covering. This is right on the CDC site. And they don't really talk a lot about if it works or not. They just tell you you should do this. So it's quite interesting. Now in Massachusetts, and you can go to your own state's government site, it says wear a mask in public, and there's an order that I want to show you right here. What it says is Governor Baker, who's the quote unquote Republican governor of Massachusetts, has issued an order effective Wednesday, May 6, requiring face masks or cloth face coverings in public places where social distancing is not possible. This applies to both indoor and outdoor spaces. Exceptions include children under the age of 2 and those unable to wear a mask or face covering due to medical condition. Read the full Department of Public Health guidance. By the way, this is something everyone should know. You can tell people, I have a medical condition that does not allow you to wear a mask. And you don't have to tell them what that medical condition is, because according to HIPAA, they have no right to ask you. So I just want to tell you that FYI. They have no right to ask you what medical condition, but that's one of the rules here. Then it says tips on the proper use of masks and coverings. And if you read this, it says a face covering can include anything that covers your nose and mouth, including dust masks, scarves, and bandanas. Do not use healthcare worker masks, such as the N95 masks. Those should be preserved for healthcare workers. It is important that you wear these face coverings or masks in situations where it's difficult to maintain social distance of 6 feet from others, for example, in a pharmacy or grocery store. So just to keep this clear, what they're saying is that if you're not 6 feet away, you're going to be closer. They want you to wear a mask. They're saying it can be a bandana, it can be cloth, but the N95 is for healthcare workers, okay? So you can get some medical mask, you can wear some cloth or bandana. Nothing in this advisory that whether it works or not. I went through the site, none of it really talks. It just says, when you can't do social distancing and you're close, you got to wear a mask. And by the way, Massachusetts is a $300 fine, okay? So let's go a little bit deeper into this and see what's really going on here, okay? So if we go into this, what we find is something quite fascinating. What you'll find here is that these are the kinds of face masks we're looking at. So, for example, U.S. Center for Disease Control recommends face covering for sick patients, the general public. They're pretty much saying everyone should do it, healthcare workers. And the most common types of face masks, these are these surgical masks, okay? Used by the surgical mask, cloth face covering. Again, we're not talking about the N95. And right now, there's no conclusive clinical evidence at all for the effectiveness of face masks. And the possible reason is virus size is too small to be filtered out. But here's a surgical mask above, and here's a cloth mask that you may see wearing. But again, cloth masks include bandanas, etc. Now, when I went through the literature, I try to get the most recent literature. So the 4 papers we curated down to 3 of them from 2020. One of them is from around 2015, 2017, okay? So we're gonna go through these in detail. One of the papers that I wanna talk about was called The Effectiveness of Surgical and Cotton Masks in Blocking SARS-CoV-2, a Control Comparison in 4 patients. So they took 4 patients and they compared it. Now, the net result, as you can see here, is I'll go right to it. Lee and colleagues showed that particles 0.04 to 0.2 microns, that's what a micrometer is, can penetrate surgical mass. So if you take a meter is about a yard, okay? This is a micron is 10 to the minus 6th, okay? So we're looking at 10 to the minus 6, right? So 0.04 to 0.2 microns, micrometers, can penetrate surgical mass. That's what they're saying. So if a particle size is 0.04 to 0.02 micrometers, okay, just remember those numbers, 0.04 to 0.2, it can penetrate through the surgical mask. Now, the size of the SARS-CoV, they haven't been able to measure, when this paper was written, the actual measure of the COVID-19, but they know the SARS-CoV, SARS virus, and you know, it's because it's a common coronavirus. From the 2002 to 2004 outbreak was estimated to be 0.08 to 0.14, okay? So look at that. That's literally in the range that the particles 0.04 to can penetrate. So what that means is the SARS virus, coronavirus, definitely the CoV, and the assumption here is that this size is not that different, that too can penetrate through the surgical mask. Now that's assuming the SARS-CoV-2 has a similar size and surgical masks are unlikely to filter this virus. And what they did was what you can see here, they literally went through and they did various tests. So they literally had people not wear a mask and cough. Then they had people put on the mask and cough, a cloth mask, or first a surgical mask. Then they had someone put on a cloth mask and cough. Then they had people take the mask off again, and they did it into a petri dish, okay? So they had a petri dish. Again, just to review, in the first case here, they coughed without the mask. Then they put on the surgical mask, coughed. Then they put the cloth mask and coughed, and then they did it without the mask again. And what you can see here are 4 patients, and they're patients aging between the age of 61, 62, 35, and 82. So from 35 to 82, and each of these patients did this. What you can see here, the evidence is quite inconclusive. So if you look at the petri dish, without the mask, about 3.53 units of stuff landed on the petri dish. In the case of the 61-year-old male, 3.226, not that difference with the surgical mask, 2.27 with the cotton mask, and without the mask, 3.23. So just look at patient 1. There's not that much difference between wearing a mask and not wearing a mask, and wearing a cotton mask or wearing a surgical mask. Then similar, if you look at patient 1, they did the same thing, and they looked at the mask surface. So you cough, and you look at the outside of the mask surface, and you see there's around 2.21. So there's particles that land on the outside. On the inner surface, it looks like it's not detectable. Everything went through because of the force of the turbulence of the cough. Then the outer surface of the cotton mask had around the same, 2.6, and nothing on the inner surface. So it looks like when you cough, the outer surface gets stuff on it, and stuff goes through. Again, remember, the size of this is of the coronavirus is expected to be much smaller than the actual the holes in the mask. So it's basically like mosquitoes going through a chain link wire fence. Same thing if you look at patient number 2, you see again, not that difference, 2.14, 1.80, if you can see here in the coughing, or 2.08 in the coughing without the mask. And same here, similar results. But the bottom line is neither the surgical mask nor the cotton mask was effective in filtering the virus, okay? Things are going through. And when this report ended, what it said was surgical masks are unlikely to filter this virus. And it said neither the surgical nor cotton mask effectively filtered the SARS-CoV-2 during coughs by infected patients. So there you go, okay? So the net of it is what they're finding in that study was whether you had the mask or not, surgical mask or the cloth mask, which is what we as a public have access to. We're not supposed to get access to the N95. And by the way, the N95 has 0.01% or 0.1%. It's pretty good because it's really tight and nothing really gets through that, okay? But we'll come back to some of the problems with that. But that's the point with this particular mask, okay? That the cloth mask or the surgical mask, things are just going to go through. And you saw that in the experiment that they did. Now let's go and look at what happens when we look at when we start considering the next mask, which is the mask with the, the next study I want to look at. This was a study that it basically showed that cloth masks increase in infection risk in the healthcare workers. So I'm going to walk you through this. So what they did here was they took about 1,600 people, okay? They gave them a medical mask, which is a surgical mask, a cloth mask in the control group. And what you see here is quite interesting, that you find here that there's a 13% increase. ILI means influenza. So this is a cloth mask, and there's a 13 times increase, 13 times more likely to get influenza-like illness compared to the ones who wore the medical masks. So if you wear the cloth masks, you're going to get 13 times more increase of getting influenza-type illness versus a medical mask. So this basically argues, well, the medical mask we just showed, the stuff is going to go out. If you cough, it's just going to go right through it. But this is showing, well, if you're going to choose between the medical and the cloth mask, the medical mask is going to have a 1/13th of a chance of you getting ILI, influenza-like symptoms. But the penetration of the particles through the cloth mask was 97%, through medical mask was 44%. So they're saying in the cloth mask, pretty much everything's going to go through, and through the medical mask around 44%. The previous research said there wasn't any difference. But the bottom line, you can see that the cloth masks, according to this, are going to cause more influenza-like symptoms. But the previous research basically said it's not going to make a difference. And this study was the first randomized control study done, which means they had 3 groups. They had the medical mask, the cloth mask, and the control group. And what this showed was that the study is the first RCT of cloth masks, and the results caution against the use of cloth masks. And because they said moisture retention, reuse of cloth masks, and poor filtration may result in increased risk of infection. Okay, so this one's saying, the first one saying they both, so think about what the model here was, that if you're asymptomatic, so you may be a carrier. This is why the masks are supposedly being promoted, is that I'm a carrier and someone else doesn't have it. So if I cough, I don't want them to get it. Well, the first research paper is clearly showing it's going to go through anyway. The second research paper is showing that you wearing it are going to increase your chance of more influenza-like symptoms. So you're putting yourself at risk. If you have it asymptomatic, you may increase your chance of getting influenza, because of the problems with it. The result there is that you may be asymptomatic. It basically is showing if you cough, you're not going to really protect someone else because they're going to get it. The other piece of this is that you're also going to increase your risk of getting influenza. Okay. So let's go back and look at now. The question was, people have asked, well, what about the N95 mask? People wanted me to cover this when I was looking at this. And this study really looked at the N95 mask. This was in respiratory care. And the study demonstrated the subject with COPD, which is, the breathing difficulty had, this was, they looked at healthcare workers, and they found out that there was an increased chance of those people getting dyspnea, which is shortness of breath. And I want to walk you through all the sort of 5 findings of this research. It's basically found out that if you're wearing the N95 mask, again, now we're not looking for the general public, but for healthcare workers, that if you wore, first of all, these masks are not supposed to be, the N95 are not supposed to be worn more than an hour or 2 hours at max. But that can risk the chance of headaches. I think someone just wrote to me on Instagram. Did someone write that? Yeah, someone wrote here that they had more headaches from wearing masks. But the N95 mask for prolonged periods can increase the risks of headaches in people prone to headaches. So that was one result that came out. So if you're prone to headaches, you really increase your chance of getting headaches much sooner. For those with COPD, which is a breathing issue, wearing the N95 mask was increased shortness of breath and breathing discomfort. The other interesting that they noticed was that people, this was sort of interesting, they noticed that people who wore the mask for up to 2 hours, it didn't affect those people with coronary heart disease. They said those people were stable. However, they found out that the gas exchange, when you breathe, you're breathing in O2, you're letting out CO2, but when you breathe in O2, you're also letting some oxygen out and CO2, obviously. But there's a gas exchange that's supposed to be a certain equilibrium. And what they found out was that gas exchange levels of CO2 and O2 were affected in pregnant women after 1 hour of use. So there are pregnant healthcare workers. So it affected their gas exchange. Now, if you go on the internet, you'll see some interesting propaganda on both sides. Some people say, well, it doesn't increase CO2. And other people say, well, it doesn't decrease O2. It's not the increase or the decrease. It's the balance of those two. That's what's being affected to be accurate. So again, we're going beyond the left, right, pro O2, pro CO2, that kind of thing. But it's the gas exchange balance, which is important for your health. So one of the important conclusions here is that wearing the N95 mask induced a mean 37% reduction in that air exchange volume, that balance. And for the elderly, the people with illnesses, chronic lung disease, and in fact, people with heart disease or stroke, and pregnant women, this is obviously something that should be of concern. So this is, again, the N95 mask if you have healthcare workers working in there. The other interesting thing, came from the fourth paper. Just to reiterate, I went and actually looked at the paper on the healthcare women who were pregnant. Now, breathing through the N95 mask materials have been shown to impede the gaseous exchange and impose an additional workload on the metabolic system, which means the entire metabolism of pregnant healthcare workers. And this needs to be taken into account when people start consideration of guidelines for respirator use. So the benefits of using the N95 mask to prevent serious emerging infectious disease should be weighed against the potential respiratory consequences associated with the N95 respirator usage. So that sort of gives you a whole picture. So when we really summarize this, again, the CDC and the state are recommending we wear these masks, and the masks that they're recommending are the medical masks or the cloth masks. And again, the N95 masks are only for the healthcare workers, but the medical masks and the cloth masks are unlikely, from the research from the survey we just did from the curated literature, are unlikely to be effective against a virus transmission, okay? That's the reality. And then the N95 masks for healthcare workers disturb the gas exchange, the O2 CO2 balance after prolonged use. So over 1 hour, 2 hours, they pose a risk for the elderly, pregnant women, and those with pre-existing conditions. Now, the other piece of this, which I talked about yesterday, is look, the mask wearing itself is in many ways, it's an antisocial activity, okay? People are walking around, you don't know who's behind the mask. It really creates a lot of psychological issues. There's research emerging about that. And it creates, it furthers this social isolation between people, trust. And as I talked about yesterday, one of the most important things we need to recognize is the number one way that people live long. It's not food, it's not, exercise. The number one is social connections with people, your relationship with people, your connectedness, the friendships, the fellowship. That social connection really boosts the immune system. It boosts antiviral compounds. Those people are socially isolated, as the research that was done by Stephen Cole showed in the proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. You have a massive drop in gene expression of the beautiful antiviral compounds that your body, its own pharmacy, your body is a pharmaceutical company, if you want to think about it. Your body produces amazing pharmaceuticals to protect you. It produces antiviral compounds when you feel safe and friendly and secure in good social relationships. And when you're when you feel good and you have that friendships, your body actually lowers inflammatory compounds. When you're socially isolated and you don't trust people and you have all of that psychological stress, your body will actually create inflammation and lower antiviral compounds. So separate from the mechanics I just talked about, the fact that cloth masks could increase viral infection, okay, 13 times more than the surgical mask. The other piece is both of them, if you cough, you're going to spread it anyway, okay? And then the last piece is for healthcare workers, you know, you can't wear the N95s more than 1 or 2 hours. So that's what the bottom line is. So to wear a mask or not to wear a mask, I think the reality is what we're noticing is, frankly, and it doesn't, you know, make any difference with the cloth or the medical mask. That's what my conclusion is. The real issue, as I did in my video yesterday, is what can we do to boost the immune system? We have to take a systems approach to this. When we take a systems approach, we understand the immune system is a very complex system. What you need may be different than what I need. That's why I recommended a systems approach. Let's get in the sun. Let's get that vitamin D. Let's eat the dark green, leafy, purple foods, the foods with the rich carotenoids. They really build our vitamin A. But your thyroid's got to be working, right? So you want to boost it with, you know, proper iodine and iodide, which makes the thyroid work right. So your body converts those beautiful green vegetables into vitamin A. If you can't, take vitamin A palmitate, as I recommended in the letter I put out to President Trump. Take the zinc. Zinc stops viral replication. And then, you know, the vitamin C is a very, very powerful thing that modulates the immune system. It also is an antioxidant, and it supports many, many different processes in you. And then obviously you have friendships and relationships. That's why we hope this lockdown enters soon. Everything they've done to us has nothing to do with boosting immune health. Nothing. And the masks have nothing to do with boosting immune health. If anything, they're going to hurt our connections with people. Anyway, that's the answer to mask or not to mask. The answer is boost the immune system. You know, let's take down these masks and start having social relationships and boost the immune system. Now, look, if obviously someone's sick, if you get the flu or you feel something, we should do what grandma told us, right? Stay at home. You should self-quarantine yourself, you know, eat all the chicken soups and get all the great nutrients and vitamins, get sleep, okay? This is common sense. Those people are sick should quarantine themselves and keep away from other people so they boost their immune system up so they get strong and they get rested. To shut down the entire economy never made any sense to me. Please respond to question when employers are demanding people wear masks or they cannot work. Look, I've talked to a number of doctors. Here's the rule as I understand it. You have every right to say that you have a medical condition that allows you not to wear that mask. And no one can ask you what that medical condition is. It's against HIPAA, okay? So this becomes a constitutional issue, and it becomes an issue of you, protecting your rights. Now, I am not aware if this has been adjudicated. People should probably ask an employment lawyer. Maybe I'll do this as a session. Maybe I'll bring a lawyer on and talk about this. But the reality is that you have every right to say that you have a medical condition, which could be you get headaches, you get whatever by wearing those masks. And you don't have to reveal that by the HIPAA rules. So people should go explore that. Let's see what other questions we have. I'm going to go over to Instagram here, and Jen, you can keep coming. Why are so many constitutional laws being violated? You know, this is a great, great question. Day before, I had a conversation about what is actually happening in this country. And I may come back at 10 p.m. and I want to share with you my initial thoughts. If you guys want to take a quick break, or I can just go into that. Jen, you should tell me what we should do. I may take a quick break and come back. But my entire thesis on this whole thing is that we have a deep state in this country, okay? Someone said a business can deny a service if you don't wear, if you don't wear a mask. Well, this is a very interesting question. They can deny. So for example, when I was going down to Washington, D.C., we had to stop off at a rest point, and one of these rest areas said, you have to wear a mask. Well, I went in and said, look, I have a medical condition. You have no right to ask why. I'm not wearing a mask. And they didn't know what to do because they hadn't heard that before. And we basically forced them to serve me, which is we had to buy some, water and some nuts or something. Walmart will send you home with no pay, no exceptions. Interesting. I think this is a very, very interesting area of law that we need to explore, challenge, adjudicate. But the bottom line is, if we go to the science shows that it has no effect. That's what the science shows. Unless you're wearing these N95s, which I don't think Walmart would want you to wear, because you're going to increase the chance of hypoxia, less oxygenation, less gas exchange, and increase people's chance of getting other things. Also, the American Disabilities Act would love to know your rights by being made to wear a mask or being violated. Exactly. So that very good point from Virginia Forrester. So you do not have to reveal what your issues are according to the American Disabilities Act. Walmart is profiting greatly from the pandemic. Yes, they are. And they sell a lot of Chinese goods. And I want to talk about that. I'm going to come back. I'm going to take a break because I want to end this. I think at 10:15, I'm going to share with you my theory on what's actually going on in this country. And to give you a preview about that before I end this session, is that what's really happened is that the deep state is really a collaboration of the Chinese Communist Party, Hollywood, Wall Street, the big universities, big academia, etc., and including our politicians, left and right. We as a country are being sold out. We as a country are being sold out to China Inc. Deep state equals China equals Hollywood. All of these guys are one big deep state Inc. And that deep state Inc. wants to model this after China. Well, how does China work? Okay, China works in the following way. It's 0.00001% Chinese Communist Party, which are the elites, and everyone else is trash. They treat everyone like the basically workers working on a big factory machine. 0.001% elites and everyone else below. They don't want any entrepreneurs. They don't want any people using their minds. They don't want any real small business owners. Exactly as Christopher Nunn said, the whole world is being sold out, and our politicians, our lawyer lobbyists are doing that. They don't have any patriotism. And we need to wake up to this. That's why in this recent COVID event, which I call one of the biggest fear-mongering hoaxes, whether there's a virus or not is not the issue. But the fear that was driven was done not to attack the 0.001%, not to attack the super uber poor who are on reservations already, being given welfare and money, but to really attack the small business owners like you and me, the inventors, the innovators, the entrepreneurs, the rebels, people who have a brain and think for themselves. Someone said, how about businesses being allowed to take your temperature when they reopen states? Ridiculous. I mean, all of this stuff we're entering. And now remember, all of this stuff matches how China operates. Our country, when I come back to you around 10:15, you're going to learn that the Chinese are literally buying up America, and our politicians are selling you and I out. They are not Americans. They're fake Americans. And in the next 90 days, what we're going to witness in this country when September, October comes is there's going to be another virus. And what are they going to do? Do another shutdown? But this entire set of events, in my view, is the deep state Inc. of the United States has sold us out, is in the middle of selling us out to China. That's what's going on. The Chinese Communist Party, to be specific. And if we don't wake up, we're going to lose this country. That's what's going to go on. So I'm going to come back at 10:15. I want to end this session because when you really look at this mask thing, it's basically, looks like people in China. They want to make us China. People being social distancing, people being distrustful. We're actually, like that research showed, 13 times higher increase when you wear cloth mask of getting influenza-like symptoms. And the other research said that the cloth mask and the medical mask they're all putting out crap out. The aerosols go right through and they're going to hit someone. Okay? So it's nonsense. And furthermore, they're making us distrustful of our neighbors. They're creating a mask versus, no mask versus mask. Okay? Dialectic. And that's what they want. They want to divide this country. They want to basically destroy the small business owner. We're going to come back and talk about that. But it's about time we start recognizing we must fight. We must go for truth, freedom, and health. And that's why I keep coming back to why I'm running for US Senate, why I do these videos, why I'm still a scientist. It's about applying the scientific method. And I'll give you a short presentation just to illuminate everyone's eyes to what is China, the Chinese Communist Party, doing. And by the way, in China, you'll learn shortly, even the business people there, the big business guys, are essentially direct extensions of the Chinese Communist Party. So that's what we need to realize, that this entire mask stuff is not even an issue. It really was done to separate us, to fearmonger us, to create a ridiculous, awful Chinese Communist Party environment. And we can't allow that. We are not China. We're with the United States of America. We have the Constitution. And if you look at our Constitution and the Chinese, articles that they have, this is totally fascist. And we still have a free country. But if we don't wake up, we're going to lose it all. Thank you, everyone. I'll be back at 10.